Be sure to use the comment section below and add in your own thoughts on what I'm discussing, and we can have some good conversation roll out in the comment section. All right, so there's a lot we could talk about in relation to this new region, but I want to focus solely on a few things, and those will revolve around the battle power requirements we could see in this next content update, the equipment that we could also see, as well as some of the new capsules that we could find in the RETEM region. Now, why I want to focus on these specifically is because I want to try and answer a question with as much due diligence that I can theoretically provide. That question is, how can you make use of your time in game right now until the release of RETEM? So let's get into it. Let's start with battle power. We'll frequently come back to this question during the video, but this is one of the few things that will dictate the need to upgrade out of our current gear and capsules. So one of the first questions we have is, what battle power will be required for the entrance to this region? The battle power requirement will most likely be around 1200 to 1243 battle power. The reason I believe this is that we currently have a UQ, mining rig defense, that requires 1243 battle power, and in that UQ are level 20 monsters. SEGA has already kind of made a requirement for level 20 content. Now, I don't believe that RETEM is going to start at level 20 creatures. I would suspect we would probably see something closer to level 18, level 19 creatures in the beginning. So it's safe to assume that around 1200 to 1243 power is what we could expect to see as the first story mission requirement for battle power. So now let's dive into equipment. You know, we definitely know we're going to see new equipment and unit sets in this new region, but there is some flexibility in how they can handle the introduction of this new gear. Now, the goal of any development team is to make their new region and the equipment obtainable desirable. Another thing we can talk about is, what is the rarity of the weapons that we'll see? Now, I believe that we will probably see a trio rarity, meaning 5, 6, and 7-star gear. Just seems that that tends to be the tradition in PSO2, that they release rarities of gear in 3 stars. Another question we need to ask is, what is going to be the new max subclass level? Based on our game and our current NGS trend, the subclass is about 25% lower than the main class level, and that would put the subclass level at 26 with the new level cap, which is a weird number. So it can be assumed that 25 will probably be the new subclass level. And with that, that gives us 10 levels that they could include new equipment. And if we were to go off of the theory that we would get a trio of rarities, that being 5, 6, and 7-star gear, that could potentially put new gear every 3 levels. So you would start seeing gear at level 18, level 21, and level 24. This would match up with what we have somewhat seen. We started at level 1 with base 1-star equipment, and then we had a trio of rarities, that being 2, 3, and 4 come out. And the rarities of those were at level 4, level 8, and then we saw our first 4-star gear at level 11. Now, granted, we saw some more 4-star gear after that, but if we take in that first initial 4, 8, and 11 guideline, it can match up to this level 18, level 21, and level 24 equipment progression. Having the 7-star gear end at level 24 would allow a final 25th level of gear that could be introduced, say with the induction of new Gigantix or new content that they decide to bring out at a later date. They could still include that in the 7-star rarity gear, but put a level 25 requirement on it. Another question that we can ask is, will there be a limit break to level 50 on weapons and units? And in my opinion, most likely. It fits the trend that we have currently seen with all of our gear going to level 40 and every previous equipment rarity being able to be limit broken to that level of 40. Another thing we know about our current system is that every time we reached that 10th level, we received a new augment slot. So if we do see this limit break to 50, we can expect there to be a 5th augment slot. So that will also affect how we augment our gear. One thing to note about limit breaking is that the 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star equipment all have different stats that scale once they've began limit breaking. As an example, prim weapons gain 2 attack per level once they begin limit breaking, which is at level 10. Spheas gain about 1.8 attack per level, and Theseus gain 1.5 per level. So with this in mind, it's safe to assume that our 4 stars will probably receive something around 1 to 1.2 or 1.3 attack per level, which means that if we limit break to 50, we will most likely see 12 to 13 attack gain on our current weapons. Here's another question. Will we have Gigantix right off the bat? This is a toss-up. They could introduce it right away. Chances are, if equipment progression goes up to a level 25 cap, this would be our level 25 gear. It was about a month after the game released that we saw Malevolence, so chances are we could see that same type of progression here, where we have the combat zones gear to go acquire, and that's our technically best in slot gear. And then, you know, a month after RETEM release, we would then have Gigantix show up, and then we would be able to go fight those monsters for the new gear. Additionally, this is probably where we get level 3 Gigas capsules, so you could make the case that if they do release it in the same manner that they did with the Alio region, that level 2 Gigas capsules are going to still be very valuable come the new region, because it's going to be the highest rarity Gigas capsule you could use on the new gear. So speaking of capsules, let's go ahead and just do a deep dive into that now. We know that there's going to be new boss capsules, but there is a big question of what will the stats be? There's nothing stating that these boss capsules have to follow the general trend that we have seen so far in the game. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of variety with these boss souls. You got to remind yourself, you can only equip one boss soul, so it makes sense for them to offer a bunch of combinations as we continue through the game to allow you, the player, a lot of choices in how you want to create your units and equipment. This can also make a case for previous boss souls still being relevant to an extent in the future content. What will the stats be on the new capsules? So this is another completely speculative thing, but what we do know is that potency augments, that stat is calculated multiplicatively. What this means is that every single percent of potency, it scales off of the next one. So this is an exponential equation, which means that potency can very quickly get out of hand. Now, if we factor in the opportunity of limit breaking to 50, you're introducing a whole 4 slots more of augments that you could put on top of it, which that alone is going to increase this potency exponential equation even higher. And so you really have to sit and consider, what are the likelihood of them increasing the potency of these new capsules in this new region by that much? And you start to realize that if they increase it by like even 1%, these new potency values start to get a little bit outrageous. So it's for this reason that I have a feeling that we're probably only going to see a potency gain of 0.5 on most of our capsules. You really have to start thinking about how much are these new capsules going to cost right away, and how much are capsules of these variety costing right now. This type of logic would allow you to invest in the amount of capsules you'll need for the future right now for a very small price, and then give you the ability to sell all of the new capsules right away when there's hype prices, when everybody's seeking these out, and then you can reinvest into those capsules at a later date when the prices start to normalize and balance out. Another question we can ask is, are we going to get Boss Soul 3 and Dreadkeeper 3 exchanges on previous souls? It's a possibility. It would allow these old capsules to be relevant, and it would create a game that relies on going back to old content in order to get augments, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. New capsules can vary with what they provide. It would allow you to have more choices in how you augment, and this would also make the old content still valuable for any new players going through the region, and allow more experienced players to go back and farm different regions for Meseta. We know that we're going to get a new Domina for the new region, Ret Domina. But what could the effects be? It's a tough question to ask. There's a lot of things that it could have. Here's the deal. We know that most likely all of these region note capsules are going to be able to be fused into each other at some point when we get all the regions to make some sort of World Domina or Halphia Domina capsule, right? So I think it's an easier question to ask, what would that capsule have? A World Domina capsule would probably have a little bit of everything, which would be potency, floor potency, health, photon power, damage resist, status resist, possibly with the introduction of crit potency or critical activation rate, right? They could have a lot of these things. We know that Ret Domina already had a sizable amount of potency for the first region of the game, right? It was a 1.5% potency capsule when most of the capsules in the game could only go to 2% potency, right? So it is likely that Ret Domina would not share this same fate, meaning it's probably not going to have a large amount of potency compared to the potency of its other capsules in this region. So chances are this Domino will probably have a priority on a different stat in some health points or photon power, and it could have potency, but chances are it's going to be like 1%. There's so many other stats they're going to have to hit on to make this World Domina capsule, so it makes sense for them to have this Ret Domina focus on something else. Do I have any thoughts on how the new stats will play out in RETEM? Remember, battle power is really important. It's our gear score in the game, and it requires us to get that battle power to unlock new content, right? It wouldn't be good gameplay if we can unlock everything with our current stats that we can achieve with our current gear. So if you consider these battle power requirements, there's really only two options that you can increase battle power in this new zone that doesn't happen for every single character, right? And that would be the injection of new equipment and capsules. So it's easy for them to make this new battle power exist if the attack and the defense of these new weapons and units be significantly higher than what we've seen in our current game. The other option is that they could mess with capsules, but once again, we get a lot of our stats from potency, and potency is a very finicky equation. It's multiplicative. So you got to be careful with that. So with that in mind, I do believe that we are going to see equipment with much, much higher values. It's safe to say that the biggest change that we are going to see in this new region is going to come in the form of equipment. Capsules may see a slight potency increase. It might see a considerable HP and photon power increase, potentially, but the fact stands that our game is based off potency, and you can't really increase potency that much without that equation getting out of hand. We also know that developers have introduced this battle power gear score system, and that's their way of gating you out of content. And we know it'll make a healthy game if they force you into new equipment. And to do that, they have to have a battle power requirement that can only exist if you go into this new gear. And based on what we know how stats work, they're going to have to make a significant increase into these attack and defense stats on this new gear to make it so you have to go into that new gear. So in my opinion, it's pretty safe to say the content that is going to be struck with the biggest power scaling or power creeping going into RETEM is going to be equipment. So if you believe in what I'm saying to be potentially true, there is some stuff you can do in game right now to take full advantage of your time before RETEM shows up. You can invest in capsules that are only farmable and are in limited supply. That would specifically be Dreadkeepers and Ret Dominas. Dreadkeepers could potentially get the capsule exchange, and we know that Ret Domina is going to be used for something later in the future, but could potentially still be a very important capsule for endgame augmenting. And since we're not going back to Alio as much, and there's not as many people farming the Alio region, that's going to make Domina prices go way up, since the supply will be little and the demand is going to be at an all-time high while people are making new gear. You can also consider investing in soul capsules if you believe the capsule exchange will allow for Boss Soul 3 variants. So if you really believe that they will have a Daedal 3, Nex 3, Pettis 3, you could invest in those right now while they're really cheap. We currently still have the Halloween event going. People are still getting their hands on stacks of these souls and selling them in the marketplace for dirt cheap. Since nobody is upgrading gear right now, these souls are going for all-time lows on every server. I'm not saying to throw literally your entire bank at it, but it may not hurt to invest in 30 or 40 of each of these capsules, because they could be potentially exchangeable into these new capsules, these Boss Soul 3s, and still be best in slot capsules. So my honest takeaway message is work on capsules that you believe could still be a worthwhile investment in the future, whether or not you're planning on selling them or simply using them on this new RETEM gear. The gear is going to probably get you into these battle power requirement zones, and the capsules will just maintain your attack power while in these regions. But I would consider selling peak endgame gear in our current metagame if you can still get your hands out of them for any sort of investment, because that is going to be the content that is going to have to be replaced in order to create a healthy battle power slash gear score environment moving forward, forcing you to go into new RETEM gear.